Hey, Lynn, how are you doing? It's great to be able to have this conversation with you today on behalf of our members at the National League of Cities. And so uh, I just wanted to first say it's just such a pleasure to have Tyler as a title sponsor of our conference. So I really appreciate your support.
Oh, absolutely, Clarence, and thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk about some of these topics today.
Well, the first thing is I know that you spent some time in Washington, D.C., and then you went back to Texas. How was your time at Georgetown?
Oh, I tell people all the time, Clarence, that Georgetown was, for a lot of people, your college years are they're very fond years, and those were some of the best years of my life. I was fortunate to go to a school like Georgetown and being in a city like DC where there's just so much action, so much buzzing going along. It was just exciting. I really enjoyed my time there, and unfortunately, I don't make it back there as much as I'd like.
Well, we hope after this COVID period that you and I will be able to get together at some point and break bread and be able to talk about some of those times because it's a great city. And so, you've been to at Tyler Tech since 1998, and now you are, the president and CEO. How are things going in your role?
Well, it's been an interesting journey for sure, Clarence. I got to tell you, back in the summer of '98, if you'd have told me that in the fall of 2020 I'd still be at Tyler, I'd probably be scratching my head. I've been at Tyler from the very beginning, from when we were just this small little company with this idea around local government and public sector, and really been there to build the whole company from the beginning all the way through to today. And it's been real rewarding. It's been real rewarding to watch the company grow. It's been rewarding to see what we've done with our clients. It's been rewarding for our employees, as if we provide opportunities for them, and really all the things that we've done for our clients as we've expanded our offerings over the years. It's just a great business, and I feel fortunate to be a part of it.
No, that's exciting to be able to be a part of that journey. And actually, the fact that you guys are at the right time and the right place to provide solutions to cities, towns, and villages throughout America. And so I commend you for your growth and commitment to your company. I do want to talk about some important issues, and the first is about around cybersecurity. And the fact that we're seeing a 50% increase in attacks on local governments, and the ransomware requests are getting even higher on local governments. But you guys as well have experienced ransomware attack. While I'm not asking you to go into the details of it, but how did that experience last year shape and change your company? And can you share any lessons from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely, Clarence. And you're right. It's certainly a timely question. It's certainly a timely topic. We're now about 6 weeks into this. It's still an ongoing investigation, and so because of that, as you said, I have been said I can't really go into a lot of the specifics, but I certainly can talk about it generally, and really I'm happy to do so. Stepping back, we talked a little about it before we got on air, but cyber attacks, as you said, they've been increasing all across the company and really across all industries by these bad guys. And I've actually learned a new term throughout this process. They call them TAs or threat actors. I used to just call them bad guys or criminals. But these threat actors, and what we've seen is, yes, they've been on the rise over the last several years, but even particularly this year in 2020, experts will tell you that cybersecurity attacks have increased significantly since the onset of COVID and work from home. And I think what's happened is these threat actors realize that as people work from home, they may be a little bit more distracted while they're trying to perform their work. They're juggling families and responsibilities. They may be less conscious about some of the security protocols that they'd normally a little more careful with when they're in their work environment. And so I think they've seen some openings, and, nobody's really immune to this. We talked earlier, the public sector is not immune to this increased activity. We're seeing a lot of our clients have had more and more attacks, and unfortunately, it's the world we live in, and experts will tell you, it's really not for all of us, whether it's a company like Tyler, it's the public sector, it's Target, it's whoever, it's really a matter of if these days an attack happens, not a matter of when. But going back to our specific incident, you asked about that, and this, Clarence, this was really that 3 a.m. call that you prepare for, but you really hope you never get. And it was literally 3 in the morning, about 6 weeks ago. We learned that an unauthorized intruder had disrupted some access to our internal systems. So this was really our phone systems and our website. This was none of our client-facing systems, not our hosted systems. Those were still intact. Those were separate, but still, very challenging for us because as a software company with, over 10,000 clients and 26,000 installations across the U.S., we use those phone systems to support our clients every day. We use our website to provide other sorts of support services for our clients. So, while these were distinct and separate from our client systems, it was really still a very big challenge. I'd say, fortunately for us, we had a cybersecurity response plan that was already in place. And so when you start off asking, what are the lessons learned from this? I think the biggest lesson learned is really be prepared because this is going to happen at some point. And so I think being prepared is the best thing that any organization can do.
So, oftentimes, we see the private sector investing more in cyber protection than local governments. What do you see are the greatest threats of cyber to local governments? And are there any resources to help local governments deal with these threats?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think when I look at the local government landscape, I think there's some general conditions that sort of may serve to, enhance cyber threats, if you will. And then from what we see out there, there are a couple of very specific threats that I think your clients are our clients and people in the NLC are experiencing. And so let's talk a little bit about each of those. I think generally speaking, when I think about attacks on the public sector, we talk about how they're only going to increase. And, I say, so why do I say that? And when I think about it, I really think about three things. I think first, in part is because it's really the business that the local governments do. I mean, think about what they do day in and day out and some of the personal information that they hold within their systems. And, really local government's daily operations they're so essential to serving the needs of the citizens. And the ability for threat actors to potentially come in and shut those operations down, that's pretty enticing to these bad guys. And, these threat actors, they're driven by money, but they're also driven by ego. And shutting down a city is a pretty big skin on the wall. And so, I think that's one thing sort of in the general landscape. I think beyond that, I think there's still so many legacy systems that are out there in circulation in the public sector. And I think some of those systems simply don't have a lot of the modern security embedded in them that more modern cloud-based systems do. And so I think that's another factor. I think thirdly is potentially budget constraints are an issue. We talk about this, we'll talk about this some when we talk about the cloud, but organizations, as you mentioned, any organization, they simply can't spend on the infrastructure and the security the way cloud companies like AWS can spend. So, to the extent that local government's still trying to manage all these risks in-house, that becomes quite a task. So I think you sort of take that general landscape, this is the business that they do. It's essential. It's high profile. You're talking about some legacy systems out there. You're talking about budget constraints. And I think that makes it sort of a ripe environment for threat actors. When you talk about some of the more specific things that we see going on in the world today with our clients in the local government world, I think you really see a couple of things. You're seeing, I think two of the bigger threats really are ransomware and then what we call business email compromise. You mentioned ransomware. That's something you read about a lot in the press. And, ransomware can really infiltrate a system in a variety of ways. And, today's world, everybody's connected to the internet. And all it can take is someone to click a link, open an email attachment, and boom, the next thing you know, it's in and it's doing its damage. And the cost can be substantial. Business email compromise probably gets a little less attention, but can be every bit as costly. And this is where things where people sort of they hijack your email, although not really. And so an email will come in, say to my organization, and it will go to somebody, it will look like it comes from Lynn Moore. But if you're not careful and click on, the email itself and say, well, it's not Lynn Moore at tylertech.com, it's Lynn Moore with some sort of crazy tail on the end. And people click on it and all of a sudden they think they're conversing with a very senior person, whether it's you or me or the finance director. And next thing you know, they're out there buying gift cards, or they're wiring money, or they're doing all kinds of things. And as silly as it may seem, it's really prevalent.
Yeah, my team tend to get that from me, and it's about wiring money, and they know for sure that I'm so cheap that I'm not asking anybody to wire any money these days.
But
Let me ask,
you might devote some money to Gladys Knight, but other than that, you're not wiring money.
that is right. That is right. So that's a city summit plug. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what's the role of the federal government in this space and helping local governments address these threats?
So I think, right now there's a few resources out there that local governments can turn to. There is a federal government resource at the Homeland Security, their cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. They got resources online. They can help you put together a cybersecurity program. We here at Tyler, we actually have some resources. We actually put out a daily threat brief that cities can access and keep up to date with the latest threats. That's free. If city's interested, all you got to do is send an email to dailythreatbrief@tylertech.com, and we'll get you signed up, and you can start getting updated information on what we see out there. There's other organizations out there that can help cities. There's, you may be aware of it, the MSISAC, which is the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Again, that's a cybersecurity information sharing organization for state and local governments, and my understanding membership's free there. In terms of, it would be interesting to see, obviously we're going through a lot with COVID, and there's a lot of talk about, budgets and budget pressures at state and local government. We had the CARES Act passed. It would be interesting to see if the federal government in the future would, continue to do more funding at the state and local government level, but really tie some of that funding to technology, which I think could really help with some of the cybersecurity issues that local governments face.
So as you know, local government leaders have to deal with a lot of things, especially during this time. The COVID-19, the social uprising, the economy. But this issue of cybersecurity is important as well. What kind of advice would you give to city leaders about protecting their cities and residents from these types of attacks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to give you my best advice. I'm not the IT technical expert, but just through my experience and leading an organization as large as Tyler and the things that we got to try to prevent. I sort of give you some of the lessons that we've learned over the years. And again, as we said, it's really not a question of if, it's a question of when. And so given that, I think it's really important for any organization to establish really two key things. First, I think it's important, every organization has to establish a certain culture and mentality around cybersecurity. It needs to be woven into the framework of the organization. And then second, as we sort of talked about earlier, you need to be prepared. Have a comprehensive incident response plan. Review that plan constantly. Make sure people in your organization are trained on it and know what to do. I can dive into a little bit of each of those a little bit more. We talk about the first, creating a culture around cybersecurity. That's a dedicated effort. It's creating a certain mindset. It takes constant training of your employees. It's not training them once, it's ongoing training. It means spending some money on the latest detection devices and defensive tools. It means engaging multi-factor authorizations, which makes doing internal business a little bit more of a hassle, but it's creating that more security, and it's just creating that mindset. And so, I think creating that culture is real important, and I think it helps lower your risk, but it doesn't prevent everything. And so the next thing is, let's talk about, what kind of plan do you have to have in place, and how do you go about creating that plan? And I think really what you need to do is you need to be thinking down the road. You need to go ahead and think, okay, give me the worst case scenario, and let's start mapping out how do we respond. We had that plan at Tyler and really followed that plan. And doing that, I think really it gives you a sense of calm in the storm. These things happen and they're going to go a million different ways, but being prepared sort of helps you sort of work through that network. I do think that, the first few hours are really critical. That's, depending on how you respond, it can really make a big difference on how much it's contained and ultimately how you ultimately deal with it. And so being prepared and executing on that plan is is critical. Already having some of your outside resources, who are your third-party IT experts out there? You don't want to have this event happen and then go check the yellow page and say, who do I need to call? I mean, you need to have those people lined up. Who's my outside cybersecurity counsel, who can really give me great advice out of the gate, and really also, think about, I think when these things happen, one of the most important things to think through, and it may not come to mind at first, is really around communication. That doesn't matter the organization. You've got to communicate with your employees. You got to communicate with your constituents, whether they're your clients or the public, and knowing what to say and what not to say, and trying to keep them informed and being transparent. I think it's really essential for any organization's credibility. And I think we've done a pretty good job at that at Tyler with our incident. And as it's gone through, again, just, it's like any sort of time of uncertainty. Communication is just so important.
Well, Lynn, I got to say that I've learned a lot from you and listening to you talk about what city leaders need to do during this time. And first of all, being prepared is the one most important things. Creating a culture that trained employees as well as residents to be cautious about ransomware and cybersecurity in general. And then you got to put some money to it because if you don't, it's going to cost you more. And so be prepared, communicate, be transparent. All of those things are important to making sure that city leaders are ready to lead their cities during this time. So thank you so much. I appreciate it and look forward to talking to you in a few minutes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Clarence.